Welcome to the Unearthed Man Podcast, the journey to becoming a conscious man, hosted by Milvo. Hey all, Milvo here, and welcome to episode 11 of the Unearthed Man Podcast. I just want to kick off by saying a huge thank you. I was looking at some of the stats during the week as to where the podcast has got to and where I'm up. And so episode 10 came out last week, which was awesome. I'm really happy that we got to the point of doing 10 episodes, which also means, there's been some beautiful men who've agreed to come on and do some interviews along the way, which is great. But on top of that, we've actually had in the order of 450 plus downloads of the podcast. So there are a number of people out there who are genuinely in and interested in listening to what's happening in the podcast space, which I just want to send my love and my thanks to all of you who have decided to jump on. The other thing that I've noticed is that effectively it's been listened to now in pretty much in every continent. So Canada, US, Chile, through Asia, Vanuatu, Australia, over in Uganda. So there has been a bit of a wide reach of the podcast. Predominantly, most of the listeners are here in Australia, which is beautiful. And I love all of you beautiful Australians for jumping in. But to know that I'm also getting coverage across a number of other countries is hugely heartwarming. And sorry, I left out beautiful New Zealand as well. So it's just ongoing and lots of encouragement for me to do this. As always, feel free to contact me, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. And before we get into this episode, which is all about courage and looking at what that looks like, I want to again thank those people. So what's also happening is I'm actually getting regular messaging now via Instagram chat or via LinkedIn chat of people dropping in and saying, hey, look, we really love what you're doing. We love the messages you're putting out there. We love the vulnerability that's being shown. And for me, that's it's overwhelming, it's emotional, but it's heartwarming all at the same time, because I'm out here wanting to let everybody else know that if I can do this, you can do this. If I can be vulnerable, if I can put out some simple messaging and you take away something from that, then that's great. And thank you, because that's going to help you go on your journey. So as people may be aware, I also do, outside this podcast, it comes out on a Thursday. Every Tuesday, there's about a 7-8 minute video that I also post up in Instagram, so IGTV, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And it's just a bit of a topical thing that comes up here and there. I've talked about disconnection and how you can actually reconnect. I've talked about morning routines and so forth. So if you're not a listener to a 20 or 30 or 40 minute podcast, but you just want to get some really short, succinct little videos, then jump into those channels as well, because that's what they're there for. So that's probably wraps up a bit of the intro. The episode today is I got my inspiration from something that actually took place this week. And as I alluded to, I had somebody who's messaged me directly and just said, hey, look, I just want to say, first of all, love what you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing. You've given me inspiration to now move on to my journey. And do you have time for a chat? And so I'm always open to get on. So we actually agreed to sit down and have a conversation, and it was amazing. It was just a beautiful, amazing conversation. Not because of what the man is going through, and he's going through some tough times at the moment, but because of the courage he showed to actually take that step to reach out and to say, I'm not doing okay. In fact, I haven't been doing okay for a number of years now. And even though people are asking me how I'm going, I just keep saying I'm okay. But deep down, he knew he wasn't. And so for him to put out his hand or reach out and connect and say, I now need to talk to this, was just a level of courage that I haven't seen a lot of people doing. But knowing that there are people out there who are willing to effectively have that courage to be completely vulnerable and to share their heart and their soul with me, and to have that open conversation was great. That person's now opened up, a bit to his partner, to family, brothers, mums, dads, as well, which is fantastic. But the first step is that opening up. So the inspiration for this about talking about courage has actually come from him, and to be honest, for me, this is my view of courage. This is my take on it. So I could go down the definitions of dictionaries and everything else, but I'll let you do that. If you want to also look at it from a psychological point of view or a psychiatrist point of view, again, I'm happy for you to go and do all that. This is my take on where it comes. And for me, courage comes across in the 4 areas that we always talk about. It comes across in physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And I want to touch on each of those elements in this episode about where I see what that courage looks like and how important it is for people to actually to have that courage. The other one thing I want to drop into is Scott McLaughlin, who I connect with on Facebook, another beautiful man. He actually put something on an article in LinkedIn which actually talked about in this day and age and times where people are willing to put themselves out there, people are seen as being brave. It's brave that you're actually putting out all these messages. But the reality is, again, we are no different to anybody else. Anybody out there has the ability to put these messages, to do this podcast, to do videos, and write articles and put it out there. I think the difference for me and what we've just learnt to do is it's about fear management. It's about how we go about identifying what fear is coming up with us, how we work out whether that's true fear or not, and how we go about managing that fear, and then how we go about executing, knowing that fear still exists. So in doing this podcast, in any episode I do, there is fear that sits underlying the message. There is fear that says, what if people don't listen to this one? What if people don't agree with the message? What if people just think I'm rambling? What if they don't get anything out of that? So there is always these underlying fears. What I do know, though, is that I can overcome that, and that's where the courage comes in. So for those who choose, and we all make a choice in life, those who choose to be mastered by fear, means that they haven't quite made that step to say, I'm going to take the courage, I'm going to have the courage to look at fear, I'm going to have the courage to step over the line where fear exists, and I'm going to just go through a fear management strategy about how I look at it, how I work with it, how I embrace it, and how it enables me to actually have power and be able to move forward. So this is where I think the two go hand in hand, that we could live in fear, which is everything that sits inside us about what people will think, what people will say, how people will perceive us, which is all the external stuff. We can then say, I understand that fear is there, but is that true fear? Is it real fear? And if it's not real fear, how can I manage it and how can I overcome it? And the key way you do that is by courage, by absolutely having the courage to do that. And so for me, there's a few examples that I'll walk into about what it looks like. And I think the easiest way for people to see courage is on the physical aspect of life. So let's run through some examples of what that looks like. Sport is a major part of the world, whether it be the world game, football as everyone else calls it, or soccer we call it in Australia. Australian rules football, rugby, cricket, American football, pick a sport. There is physical fear and physical courage you need to have. If you look at Australian rules football, there's courage to say, I'm going to run backwards into a pack, trying to get the ball, knowing that 2 or 3 men of 100 kilos each are actually going to run into me and are going to knock me over. There's physical courage required to do that. If I look at other things, ambulance, police, fire, army, navy, the physical courage required to say, if you look at a fireman, that physical courage to say, I'm physically going to run into this burning building. I'm going to take precautions, but I'm going to overcome my physical fear, and I'm actually going to go and do this, and I'm going to look to save somebody. That is pure physical courage. Police who have to go to a standoff, or there's a fight and they have to get in and break up. There's physical fear that they go through, but there's courage to say, I'm actually going to step into that fear and I'm actually going to break up this fight before something else actually happens. Then we look at other things around, window cleaners. Again, people have fear of heights. It's a physical fear. The window cleaner can go out on a high-rise building, basically lowering himself down the other side using ropes, abseil down, and clean windows. There's courage involved with that. Now, over time, sure, the fear may slightly diminish, but it is always there. And it takes immense physical courage for them to do that. So I think it's easy for us to see how that works. If we think about mental courage, and that's a little bit different, but in my aspect, I've thought through the mental courage. What does it look like to be mentally courageous? To turn up to work every day. Mentally courageous to turn up to work every day, to believe that you are good at your job. To mentally turn up and say, I am good at my job, I know I'm good at my job, and I'm going to do my job to the best of my ability. That takes courage. Not just turning up to work and going through the motions. That sits in fear. The mental courage from a work aspect is, not only am I going to turn up to work and work to my best of my ability, I'm going to act as a leader in my organization, even if I don't have the role of a leader. That takes courage, because you're putting yourself out there mentally. People are looking for you for that leadership, for the ideas about how things work. Politicians, in some instances, need that courage, that mental courage to stand up in front of press conferences and say, this may not be a nice message, but I still need to put out that message. Now, whether that message they're putting out is misinformed, or whether it is driven from greed, or is it driven from whatever other means drives it, or even it's driven from love and compassion. Having the mental courage to say, I'm going to stand there, I'm going to put out this message. In some cases, it's a good message, which is great. They're the easier ones to do. But where it's a really tough message that you have to put out there. If you think about an organization where you may have to make people redundant, mentally being able to sit in front of somebody and have the courage to talk to them direct and say, I'm sorry, you're a great person and you're a great worker, but unfortunately we have to let you go. A chief operating officer that I worked with once at General Electric exactly put that to me. He goes, the toughest job that you ever have as a leader in an organization is to tell somebody who's doing a great job that they no longer have a job. And that just takes huge mental courage for them to be able to sit down and shoot it straight and be able to actually do it. Not fluff it up, not paint around the pictures and allude to things, but have that courage to have conviction in your message and stand up and run it. Again, for me, that's my ideal of where courage comes in from a mental aspect. The third area is spiritual. Now, this, for you out there who are listening to this who, if you like, aren't into the woo-woo, if you see spiritual as being the woo-woo. From a spiritual perspective, the courage spiritually is to surrender to what is. And it's easy to say, but it's a really tough thing to do, because when you start to operate in true, and I'm not talking adapted Western spiritual world, I'm actually now talking through the Eastern side of the spirituality. And this is also coming back off a course that I'm in the middle of, and I'm loving it. You'll remember that I interviewed Sam Lewis, I think episode 6, from memory. Working with Sam, he alluded that he had a 6-week program. I've signed into it, and I must admit, it's the most amazing program that I've done. I've done some awesome programs, but this is now taken to a different level. Part of that is the spiritual courage to surrender to what is. So it's being able to go, I see who I am, and I see who I am as an individual. I see who I am as a person and as a human that I'm operating in this world. But to be able to have the courage to look beyond that and see you as a connection with everything else around you, a connection with every single object, whether that be a moving object, whether it be, in our terms, a live object, plants, animals, other people, or what we might talk as a sedentary object, a computer, a laptop, a microphone. Being able to connect with all that and say, I am one with all of these, and I am connected with all of these. There is a level of courage that you need to have to let go of all your beliefs, all your humanness, to be able to just surrender and find that ongoing enlightened attachment. So I'm not there yet. I'll be very honest with you. I'm in that space. So I'm learning how to have spiritual courage. I'm learning how to see the world in a different way. How do we actually see world from a relativity point of view and an absolute point of view? In simple terms, and excuse me if I get this wrong, Sam, but in simple terms, relativity is how you and I see things, how we see the objects around us. How we see a tree, how we look at that tree, how we see a color, how we define a color. It's all relative to my growing up and my learning and my experience compared to yours. But when you look at it from a relative point of view, there are things around horrible deaths. There's hunger in the world. There's wars in the world. There are, child trafficking, pedophilia. There's a whole lot of horrible things that are happening in the world. There's some absolutely lots of beautiful things that are going on in the world as well. But it's easier to accept all the beautiful things, the butterflies, the birds, the trees, the flowers. We can easily connect to the beautiful things. But when it comes to what we deem as the horrible things, we have a very adverse reaction to it. And that's from a relative point of view. From an absolute point of view, and this is where the courage comes in, it is from an absolute point of view, that was meant to happen. This is what is meant to happen for people to learn their lesson and learn what they need to go through. Now, for those who aren't in the woo-woo space, that sounds very harsh, but if you can see it, there's a lot more compassion that can come from it. And so for me, the spiritual courage is something I'm definitely working on, always trying to surrender to what is. No right or wrong, not good or bad, or just what is, and being able to surrender into that space. Over the next 4 weeks with Sam, I'll continue to delve into that practice. The last element then is emotional courage. And this goes back to how I was inspired to do this. For me, I think one of the toughest elements for us as humans now is to have emotional courage. Now, in a lot of terms, we might call it vulnerability. It's a simple term to say, thank you for being vulnerable or for showing yourself. But to get to the point of being vulnerable and actually people seeing you as being a vulnerable human being and a human being full of love and a human being full of emotion and a willingness to be able to talk about good, bad, and talk about all the things that are going on, you have to start with courage. You have to start with having the courage to not accept that I'm just okay, to not accept the embarrassment, not accept the emotions, not accept the fear, not accept the feelings of weakness, all these other things that have been taught around, that we've been taught and conditioned about. If I turn around and say, I'm not having a great day today, I'm actually really struggling today, here is where I'm struggling, or I haven't been well for 3 or 4 years, I have been in a dark place, I have had no motivation, I haven't been able to get out of bed, I haven't been able to support my partner, I haven't been able to show affection to my wife, my kids, I haven't been able to see the world in the beauty that it is because I am so now locked down. Having the courage to actually open up and admit to that's where you are is super huge. It should never ever be underestimated. As I said, for the man who contacted me last week, and for one to contact me was a massive step and just took immense emotional courage to actually get on the call. The second easiest thing for him was to not show up when we set up the call, because that would have been easy. So again, the emotional courage to actually show up and then to express emotionally where he is at, and to sit there and go, I am not doing well. That is, my hat's off and my heart goes out, and it warms me. It warms me that there are people willing to take the emotional courage. It doesn't take away the pain that they're feeling and the suffering they're feeling. But that warmness comes from love, it comes from compassion, and it comes from empathy, knowing I hear you and I see you, and I'm not just seeing the individual, you're actually seeing their heart. A simple way for me to think through this to align it from the emotional courage to maybe give those who need some visualization. If you think about, in fact, I'm going to pick a snake in an egg. I'm going to pick a snake and egg. I could easily pick a chicken, but that's the little fluffy one. Let's pick a snake and an egg. It's in this egg. It is in its safety zone. It's in its comfort zone. It knows it has to crack a hole in the egg to let the light in for it to move forward. So if you imagine that we've put this egg around our hearts, and the heart is where the emotional courage and the emotional vulnerability comes from. Most people are walking around their lives with this hard eggshell sitting around their hearts and sitting around where the emotion sits, and they've got this covered. And over years, the eggshell gets thicker and thicker and thicker to the point where you just lose sight of your heart and you lose sight of what it looks like. Emotional courage is getting, whether it be your egg tooth, whether it be a pick, whether it be a hammer, whatever you would like to do, the emotional courage is to basically start to break away on that shell and eventually to put a hole in that shell so some light starts to come in and the pain can start to come out. And as soon as you start to do that, the hole in the eggshell can come wider. And the protection mechanism can start to reduce. And then slowly over time, the shell diminishes. And all you end up with is the true, loving person that you need to be, who's willing to be open, who's willing to be vulnerable, who's willing to share their emotions. But not only share them, but is willing to listen and accept other people who are on the same journey. So the courage to open up is immense. But once you've opened up and broken open that shell, two things happen. One, you're open to spreading your love and what's happening with you and your honesty, your true in your heart honesty about how you're going and how you're feeling. And knowing that there is absolute strength coming from that vulnerability because you are becoming the true person you are. But you then put yourself in a position where you've opened your heart to others, and then you can see them being courageous, and you can see them showing their heart, and you can actually allow them to break through their shell. And then you have this amazing heart-to-heart connection because the energy is now allowed to transmit between your two hearts. And I'm not talking your physical heart here. I'm talking your spiritual heart, your true inner self. When those energies start to connect and the compassion's there and the sharing the vulnerabilities there, that connection is immense. The energy that comes from that is immense. And the ability to then go through life looking at things completely different becomes great. And all of a sudden, it's like, again from an analogy, and it's a gloomy, cloudy day, we all feel down and flat. When that sun comes out, when that inkling of sunshine comes out and it warms your body, you feel energized, you feel energetic, you feel alive. That's an external source coming on our body. Imagine if you could feel that every single day, but it's coming from inside of you. That you don't necessarily need the sun. The fact that you're alive, the fact that your heart's open, the fact that you are acknowledging that you're a human and has feelings, enables you to then connect with others. You then can be fully energized. You can turn around and go, I have everything I need to live my life. And on top of that, I can now share that and share out the love with everybody else that's around me and be able to share that experience with everyone else around me. So that's my key message for today. It's about courage, physical courage. Go and play sport, go and bungee jump, go and abseil, physical courage. Mental courage, know who you are, be strong in who you are, deliver strong, direct, own your messages. Spiritual, the willingness to surrender in what's happening around you and the willingness to just say, I am, and that's all I need to be. And then this emotional courage, which is all about absolutely being willing to say, I know I am. I'm a person full of love. I'm a person who has emotions. I'm willing to share those emotions, and sometimes I'm not doing a great job. So they're the 4 key messages. I wish you all have a beautiful, lovely, caring day. I'm going to go off and make sure that I'm generating my internal and my external sunshine, and that, people want to tap in and actually spare more time, just listening in and understanding there's a beautiful world out there. So, as I said, from me to you, it's the Unearthed Man. Everybody take care, and sending you much love and